Welcome to the Unpacking Life podcast. This is a podcast that deep dives into some of the questions that you think in your head, but you never say out loud. The type of stuff that you Google, but you hope that nobody sees. Now, in today's episode, we're going to be talking about story. And the specific question is, how can story make you the way that you are today? So how does your story impact your personality, your traits, your goals, your values, everything like that? And today we've got Wesley Thomas with us.
Hello, good to be back.
Good to be back. Good to have you. And we're literally going to go into detail on how your story can impact you. Now, what do you think about story? First of all, do you believe that your story, your life story can actually impact your personality?
100%. I think a lot of it stems from childhood.
Yeah.
We still have adults walking around with childhood issues, which is a fact, And I don't think I think everybody has, regardless if it's good or bad, some kind of childhood issue from there, and I think that can ultimately affect you as an adult.
Yeah.
A good example of that is my dad wasn't really around growing up.
Yeah.
So growing up, I became this independent, really ambitious person because of that.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Because you felt that you had to.
I felt like I had to. The independent side, definitely.
Yeah.
Because I was raised in a single parent household with my twin sister, and my mum was busy at work and whatnot, and I think.
So that was all females around you. So you was the only male
in the household.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was lucky in the sense where I had my granddad there if I needed that support. Never really leaned on him like that, but he taught me certain things, can't lie.
Yeah.
And my uncle as well. My uncle's kind of the one who got me into music.
Yeah.
He was a DJ at that time, so all these little things that I picked up from individual people.
Yeah.
And kind of just used some things to my benefit and other things not. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, to answer the question, I think it massively affects you as a person, as an adult, especially where you've come from, your heritage, DNA, your upbringing. All those things can contribute to who you are as a person.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Definitely. So, do you think that people often reflect on their story in the sense of, looking back and questioning why are they the way they are today? Because a lot of people they have certain traits and elements to themselves that they never question where did they actually come from.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes because people can self sabotage themselves, and a lot of the time, they have relationships with different people, and it's like they're always the problem, but they don't see it.
Yeah, it's mad.
And that often stems from, they're a part of their story or a portion of their story where something happened in life that made them the way that they are today.
Short of it, no, I don't think people do really reflect, and I'm laughing. I say it's mad because I was and still am to a point. I'm that person, where you let things affect you and as an adult.
Yeah.
Now, me growing up, there was only certain things that I picked up as when I got into relationships. You know what I mean? My anger issue, for example.
Yeah.
So I could say I was an angry child. I had tantrums as a kid. I remember going to the shop. My mum used to hate it because I used to go to the shop. If I didn't get what I wanted, I'd throw a tantrum up in the shop.
Really?
Yeah, my mum. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know how she dealt with it. Yeah, she used to lick. My mum used to lick me, and if it weren't my mum, it was my granddad again.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I was always getting licked as a kid, to be honest. Yeah. You know what I mean? But those little things there were. I know every child can be a tantrum child, but obviously there was a clear problem as to why I was like that.
Yeah.
If that makes sense, and it kind of it came through it came with me as an adult.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So even when I was in relationships and I'd get angry over stupid things, and it's like realizing why am I getting angry over those
you're
things.
quick to trigger.
Yeah. Well, yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
A really, really hot head.
Yeah. And you believe that come from your father not being there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, massively. I think I was a very deep kid. I used to ask myself certain questions. I think I was deeper than the most. And I remember one time saying to my mum, I feel depressed.
Really?
In junior school.
Yeah.
Why would I say that?
Yeah.
I know. I felt sad, but I didn't really understand why I felt sad.
But this is a time when depression isn't as talked about as what it is today. So it isn't even like you could have just picked that up because everyone's, it's the hype thing to talk about.
Yeah, of course.
It wasn't back then. Like,
yeah, of course.
Depression is definitely not something.
My mum just palms it off because you're a child. How can you be depressed in it? And to a certain degree, I kind of understand.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was deep. So I kind of asked myself loads of different questions. Why's my dad not around? Why don't I see my brothers and sisters? and also trying to find my identity, because a lot of the time we look to our parents for identity, who we are. We ask those vulnerable questions.
Yeah.
And normally, in an ideal world, you normally get the answers you need from your parents. But
Yeah.
obviously, missing dad, he's not going to answer the questions that I needed at the time. So
Yeah.
yeah, I grew up with my individual problems, definitely.
Yeah.
Which has helped shape me to be the person I am now. The reason I think I'm over ambitious, because to a certain degree I am over ambitious, is because of that.
Do you think you're over ambitious, or do you think you're just about the right level of ambition?
I think I'm just about, but there was certainly a time where I probably used that ambition as validation, in the sense of, you always want to shine.
Yeah.
Does that make? I know.
Yeah.
So, and looking back at it now, I did look back at it a couple of times. It's like, was that validation I was seeking? Because I probably wasn't getting it from my dad or my mum as a kid. You know what I mean?
Or could it have been escapism as well?
Probably.
Like people put so much into work to forget life, and like it's almost like it becomes an addiction, like a drug, and you get a high from it.
I'd say that's true, because I remember I got mini wins from about 17, and I kept getting mini wins, and it was a feeling that it's like a drug, but
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
yeah.
You get used to the winning, and I was
So
trying
it's
to
that praise that you never had.
Exactly.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah.
So is that something that's come from childhood, that that I'm trying to seek praise all the time,
Yeah,
or validation? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of carried on with me.
Yeah.
I don't think I try and seek validation now. I like to think I'm my own man, but you never know. You know what I mean? And it's definitely something I'm trying to overcome. But yeah, the ambition side of it is plays a key into the person I was, and what I didn't necessarily receive as a kid.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's a deep one, because when you think about it, it's like we don't often come back to that. We don't really question our story and look at, analyze ourselves unless something calls us to action to do it.
Yeah.
Like often it's something needs to happen in life to make us realize, actually, now, you know what, it might be me. Like I've got to look at myself and look at, where have I gone wrong? Like, and if you do recognize something that's wrong because you've made a mistake, then you've got to look at, well, where have I got this idea that was right from? Do you get me? And then you start to question like your storyline of your whole life. And I think your storyline is the key to really understanding yourself. Again, on the first episode that we did,
Of course.
Understanding yourself and the importance behind it. I think that's really important, to look back on your whole storyline and kind of write down, key events that shaped and molded you the way that you are today, in order to that's how you interact with the world today based on your experiences.
It's deep, bro. Because and I recognise it's quite a long time ago, but it made me order a book called "The Book Your Children Wish That You Had Read" as a parent. Yeah. And just a quick example in that is, and it happens in all our lives, is a woman was with a little 6-year-old kid, and the 6-year-old was climbing on a climbing frame, and the mum looked over and obviously seen it was dangerous. But the kid was fine. So she's run over, literally shouting and screaming at the child, "Get down from there, blah, blah, blah." And what had happened is, in the mother's past life, her mum used to mommy cuddle her.
Yeah.
To the point where she couldn't do anything, or she, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
that's passed on.
And it's been passed on.
Yeah.
And it's bad. It's mad, because you wouldn't recognise it necessarily.
Yeah.
And it's quite hard to recognise that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So obviously she recognised that and then apologised to the child and rectified the way that she dealt with it moving forward. But for somebody to do that, it's a very deep thing. Very strong. A very strong individual would have to question that. But I believe that every single person on this life, good or bad, has some childhood issues.
Yeah.
Definitely believe
100%. And I believe a lot of the issues that most people have as adults come from childhood trauma. And it's something that they've experienced that has kind of like, they've gone into the world, expected the world to be a certain way, and then all of a sudden they've realised, no, that isn't the world, and it's traumatised them. Ultimately, that is what it is. And I mean, there's different elements to that you could tap into, really. But even from a storytelling side of things, we are naturally, as humans, attracted to stories. Like, we like stories, 100%. And the best stories always have conflict within them. Like the story model, I mean, us as a marketing agency, because by the way, I own a digital marketing agency, and we specialize in telling stories on social media for brands and businesses to help them generate profit and stuff like that. So from a corporate sense of things, we understand how to package stories in a way that people like to receive it, because we understand the psychology of, like, people like conflict. But also in today's day and age, you've got to have a good hook at the beginning to hook the attention. But that conflict and resolution, you have to have that in there. It isn't just about having a story that's like, everything goes smoothly.
So what you're saying, in somebody's life, they have to have conflict in order to grow?
Yeah.
Is that what you think?
I believe
Yeah.
the people that grow the most are the ones that have conflicts, because nobody grows from comfort. Like, if you're comfortable and everything's going cushy, why are you going to look within and ask yourself the hard questions unless something has gone wrong to humble you, to make you realize I need to? Do you get me? Like a man that does something wrong or something like that. Often, say for example, that one that I heard the other day, a man cheats on his woman. Right, a man will often cheat on a woman and not realize why he's cheated on a woman, but really it's not the woman's fault. It's his fault, because he's got something going on internally, and he hasn't addressed it. But he really loves that woman, he says, but at the same time there's something within that's making him look elsewhere. Do you get me? And really it's to do with his inward issues, but he just hasn't addressed it. But when his woman threatens to leave, that will force him to look inward to then deal with those issues.
I hear what you're saying now.
Do you get me? Like, and that's what I call in stories call to actions. And it's Pixar. Pixar are well known for their story templates. They're the best in the game at writing stories. And the way that they set up stories in all their cartoons and animations is like, you ever seen Up? Up the film?
No.
It's a deep film. Like, it's for kids. It's quite deep as well, but it's a good film. But basically, all their animations have a story format, and what it typically is they will introduce the character in the first couple of scenes, and they will show the world of the character, what's happening in the world. So they're setting the scene and they're giving you context. But then the character goes into the world and they show you what the world was before, and then something happens, some kind of conflict that makes the character realize the world will never be the same again. And then that's the call to action for the character.
Yeah.
Do you get me?
To do something.
Yeah, to do something about it. So that could be a situation in Toy Story, for instance.
Yeah.
Woody's playing with other toys, and he's the king toy, he's the main toy to the boy. And then all of a sudden, this new toy comes back, Buzz Lightyear, which shakes up his world, and he's the number one toy. Now, the world isn't what it seems now, and he's having this internal conflict because Buzz is now taking over the world, like where he is. Do you get me?
It's mad, you know.
So then he has to look inwardly and think, well, why does he want to play with him? Why does he want to do this? And that's the true story for us, for as individuals. We play out that same story, and we like to subconsciously see these stories because we're taking them in, but really it's real life that they're showing us.
Yeah, 100%.
But it's just that most people don't look at it on that depth of a level. Do you get me? So when we're looking at stories and we're trying to understand, why are we the way we are? We have to look at what events in our life took us back to those call to actions. Like, what call to actions did we have? Like, a call to action with you would be like when you first recognized actually it's not normal to not have a father around. That would be a call to action, because then that would lead you to ask you questions. Well, why isn't he there for me? Why doesn't he love me? How can a father not love me? Like, I ask the same questions.
Yeah.
So that's when you realize, and it's the simple things of when you're at school and you go to sports day and you've got your mum representing you, but you haven't got a dad representing you. All the other dads are lining up and your space is missing, and everyone's looking, saying, where's your dad? And you blag it and you say, my dad couldn't make it today.
It's deep.
Because you don't want other people to know that you ain't got a dad.
It's deep,
Do you get me? Like, and it's all them kind of things. And internally, some people, they deal with it differently. Like, some kids go inward, and, because they haven't got that father figure, they're not going to
expose themselves.
Yeah. And they're not going to open up and be themselves.
Yeah.
But then the other side is someone will become totally independent and think, regardless, I don't need anyone, I do it on my own. And they get this stubbornness in their mind. And I think I went that way. Like, I think that's the direction.
I think I was in the middle somewhere, because I was extremely, and to a certain point, I still am independent. But I was also a deep thinker, analysing, questioning. These are all to myself, so I had a bit of both in it, you know what I mean? And I suppose it's not until my later life, or into my later adult life, that I started really opening myself up. Yeah. You know what I mean? I was very closed. Yeah. And I noticed that in relationships as well. Yeah. But yeah, it's deep, because I used to play football growing up. So I did the Saturday and the Sunday and play for the school, and it's deep because you'd see all the dads on the sideline, go on, son. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it used to kill me, bro. Yeah. It used to kill me, you know what I mean? And remember my uncle come and watch me a couple of times, but I used to question, well, why not my mum? And obviously she's working full time, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he just brought me back, you know, because
Yeah.
it used to get me upset, man.
It does.
You know, it did, man.
It does. And parents' evening.
Yeah.
Parents' evening, parents' evening when, like, you know, parents would go there and it's like your mum on her own.
Yeah.
But, like, that's why I rate my mum so much and you rate yours. Because, like, you got to think, they did parenting on their own.
Yeah, it's hard, man. Tough.
We're doing it, me and Stacey are now doing it as a married couple. And it's still tough. Do you get me? But you got to think, as a single parent, working 24/7. I mean, my mum had like 2-3 jobs, working 24/7. But then she'd still face the world and the problems in the world that would come with having a boy. And at that, having a boy, a black boy in a predominantly white area, where there's a lot of racism, like Kingshurst, North Solihull, like all that kind of area, it's known. Back in the day, it was like, you know, you'd have the Dr. Martin boots, like racist guys walking around the corners looking for like black kids to kick up and that, like you'd have all that kind of stuff like that. That was prime then. Do you get me? Like, so she dealt with all that, and it makes you respect what she did even more as an adult when you have a child. But at the time, you're just thinking to yourself, well, why isn't my dad here? Like, and you're not really looking at it. It's not until you're older and you can self-reflect and understand the reasonings behind it, because your mum won't tell you everything as a child, like they shouldn't, because you're not ready for it. But when you're young, because you don't have those answers, it molds your character to be a certain way because you think the world is a certain way, where actually it isn't. Because if it was explained to you, or if you could comprehend it, you would look at it differently.
I was gonna say, yeah, but by that time when you've recognised that things are not normal, you've already got the issues.
That's it.
That's what I mean, and so then it's hard to recognise it at that time. And I remember I used to go through. I felt like abandonment issues. I think we touched on this before, innit? Yeah. And I used to heavily rely. I remember from about 17 to whatever. I believe I've got over that now. But I used to, when I was in the relationship, I used to rely on my partner.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And almost like a mother figure.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. That makes sense.
And I remember thinking and feeling like that, but not recognising why.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Which would then lead on to being independent. It used to be a bit of a mad one.
Yeah.
I'd be independent. Like, I remember I was career driven. And the reason why I was career driven is because I used to remember saying it to myself is, I'm not going to rely on anybody. I'm going to have my own house, my own money.
Yeah.
Which is not good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because too much independence shows, in my opinion, that you've been hurt somewhere down the line.
Yeah.
And you don't want to rely on anybody.
It is.
Does that make sense?
It is.
Yeah.
It is. It's a psychological scar of, you know, you've tried to trust someone and someone's broken that trust.
Yeah.
And again, it comes back to that thing of, most of the time when people have issues or they have trauma, it's from somebody not meeting expectations.
Yeah.
Like, and your father didn't meet those expectations, same way mine didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you expect them to be there to provide, to care, to love, and they just didn't meet it.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
from then you're like, lock off, like, you're emotionally, like, and it's a tough thing. And I mean, I don't know about you, but I remember one thing that I remember is Will Smith. There was an episode in Will Smith, and it's when his dad comes back.
Relate to it.
Yeah. And his dad come back like off a long journey, and he hadn't seen his dad for ages, and he's living with Uncle Phil, and Uncle Phil's like, well, I don't know about this. I don't want him to come back in your life, because he knows what he's like. Mm-hmm. And then he tells Will Smith that, you know, we can go out for 6 weeks and you can travel with me while I'm on the lorry, and we can put work in and we can get to know each other and all this. And then last minute he lets him down and says, oh, well, son, I'm not going to be able to go. And Will's like disappointed. He says, yeah, don't worry about it. I'm fine. I'm here. I've got all the honeys here. Like, and he's making out like he's using banter and everything. And that's what often boys do. Boys make out, and this is what I say a lot to a lot of single mothers. If you've got a child that hasn't got a father around, the boy will very rarely admit to the mother that he's got something internal going on. Yeah. He will very rarely turn around and say, actually, Mum, no, I don't understand why Dad ain't here. Like, can you explain? Like, they won't.
Or just emotionally.
That's what I mean.
Or just, you know what I mean?
That's what I mean.
Open up emotionally. Like,
yeah. Like, sorry, just coming back to that Will Smith. Sorry.
Yeah.
It'll come back to that whole that thought.
Yeah.
And then Will Smith turns around and says, he goes, he leaves, the dad does, gets off and just goes. And then Will Smith goes into like a little rant with Uncle Phil. And he's saying, you know, like, it ain't like I need him to teach me how to raise my kids. It ain't like I need him to teach me how to like speak to the honeys. I don't need him to teach me how to play basketball. I've learned that all by myself. And then next thing you know, he says, he turns around and he says, well, there's nothing that man can tell me about how to love my kids. And then he breaks down and cries. And at that point there, whenever I watch that, bruv, it gets me.
Nah,
like
I've
it
watched
gets
it a
me.
few
Like,
times, yeah.
and everyone that I speak to
Yeah, it
that
is.
has had a father around, when they watch that scene, it's like that. It doesn't matter if you're over it, because I'm over it now. Like I've dealt with it, and I speak to my dad to a degree.
What, you think it brings up old?
But it brings up those feelings because you can understand
Yeah,
that
man.
feeling. Like
Yeah,
you
man.
can resonate. You really get it. You get me? And it is like when you're a child, you ask these questions. Actually, why wasn't he there? Like, especially when you have a child yourself, and you think, nah, like I could never leave my child to get up and go and just leave them and not wonder how they are and not check on them or nothing. No way. I couldn't imagine that. Like,
It's identity as well, bro.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
Yeah.
if I don't know about you, but growing up, I was questioning myself hard. Who am I? And often, kids will ask the parents in some way, shape, or form who they are. What's my identity? They're the important questions.
Yeah.
And you know, even some people that have got dad there, sometimes they can miss that question, which is obviously bad.
yeah,
But if you've got nobody else to even reference with, you know
That's
what I mean?
what I
It's
mean.
even worse than it. You know
That's
what I
what I
mean?
mean.
So I think I battled understanding who I was or who I wanted to be.
yeah,
There was no reference point, if that makes sense.
yeah. That makes perfect sense.
You know what I mean?
That makes perfect sense. And that's the thing. It's like, I mean, I don't know about you, but did you have people say to you, like, you know, around your social circle or your mum's friends or whatever, oh, you just like your dad?
My mum.
Did she?
Yeah. And
Or was
she's-
it in a good way?
Nah,
or-
she used to say, I'll
Yeah,
be honest,
in a
with you, she
bad
used to
way,
say it in a
yeah,
negative way, innit? You
yeah,
know what I
yeah.
mean? And I'm gonna be fair. Yeah, so she did. She used to say that quite a lot. You're just gonna end up like your dad.
Yeah.
Which wasn't good. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? But at the same time, it kind of fueled me to not be my dad.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It massively fueled me to not be my dad. And I remember my dad saying to me when I was about 23, 24, because he's always skitted in and out.
Yeah.
I'm not slewing your dad, but it was just telling you how it is, isn't it? But he said to me at that time, he said, son, look at your brothers and look at me. He said, just look at us as an example of what not to do.
Yeah.
And that's probably the biggest thing he's probably told me.
Yeah.
And it's a case of me just, I got love for my dad, but I definitely don't want to be who he is.
Yeah.
I'm kind of creating my own legacy. Not my own legacy, but
It is.
I'm breaking chains.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's
Exactly.
breaking chains, not
You
only
are
for me,
breaking chains.
for my son,
Exactly.
my daughter. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's
You're setting a new trend because
yeah.
coming back to that point, like your dad and my dad, I know for sure my dad as well. He wasn't around for me, but at the same time, his dad wasn't around for him. So he's continuing that pattern of things that's happening because he's probably didn't know how to be a dad, and which is no excuse, but it's like he's just continuing what he's always known. Like he's just continuing that pattern, and my dad, I mean, it's a funny situation, but he was basically abusive to my mum, and he was an alcoholic. My mum, the first time he ever hit my mum left him, but he kind of hunted us down and followed us wherever we went. And I remember sometimes like you'd hear the door knock, then you'd hear it knock again a bit louder, and next it's kicking off the door, and it'd be over my mum, and like and they'd find us and it'd just be beating my mum. And like back then, the police never took it serious. Domestic violence wasn't serious at all. Like you could do that, police would come, escort him off the premises, but then the next day he'd be there again. Do you get me? Like, and they wouldn't lock him up, so it wasn't taken as serious as what it is today. But as a child, when you're going through that, coming back to the question, I had a lot of anger issues growing up because of that, I believe. Because I remember I wanted to fight him. I remember even going into kitchen shelves and stuff, looking for a knife.
Really?
Because I knew physically I can't, as a 3-year-old, 4-year-old, I can't do nothing to this man. He's a big man.
That's deep, yeah.
Like, so I remember literally looking for a weapon or a tool or something to use because I know physically I can't stop him. But at the same time, I'm watching him hit my mum like she's a man. Do you get me? So it's like that part of that made me vulnerable of, you know, you're a child, you're seeing someone hurt someone that you love like that, you're seeing the effects of it, the aftermath of your mum having to go to hospital and all that, and you can't do nothing about it. And my mum's like working, she's trying to get by, and she'd go to work the next day like nothing happened. Do you get me? Like, because she's got to get the money in.
Thick skin.
And and like she's tough, like she's the strongest woman I know. And I used to look back at that and I used to think that's a next level of strength. But I used to think to myself as well, there's no way on earth that I'm going to let someone physically dominate me or anyone I love again. And that's what made me so focused on, like, you know, learning how to defend yourself, like fighting. Even back then, I didn't know how to fight properly, but it gave me that mindset of even if someone hits me and it hurts, I'm going to get you. Like, it gave me that resilience. It's resilience. It built a next level of resilience where, you know, you don't show that you're hurt, but at the same time, that hindered me later on in life.
Of course it does.
Because like, if you don't show that you're hurt and you're just gonna hold it in, which builds even more issues.
It's not a balance, is it? Because I'm the same in it, yeah. Because struggle makes you more thick skin.
Yeah.
Which it did me, but at the same time, I struggled to open up emotionally.
Yeah.
I actually seen it as a weakness.
Did you?
Yeah. I grew up as it was a weakness that I didn't really want to show.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And no one was asking me the question, "You right, Wes? What's going on?" You know what I mean? So there was that void. But back to what you were saying, how do you think that affected you as a person, other than anger? Is there any? What was the toughest thing that you feel like you had to deal with as an issue because of that?
I think forgiveness is one.
Really?
Like, I think that's what I struggle to forgive. Like, if someone does me wrong, I give people chances, don't get me wrong. But like him now, we have a funny relationship where, like, later on when I was about 24, probably, he come back in my life and he kind of got in touch, and like, he split up with his missus and he come back and he was going through his AA steps because he was an alcoholic. He was going through his AA steps, got back in touch, and then we sat down and had a discussion, and it was a struggle because he played it out like it was like it weren't that bad of a thing. But I explained certain things to him. I says, look, I can remember specifically what you was wearing. I can remember the colour of your top at this incident. I was like 3 at the time. Like, loads of times different things happened, but I reminded him of this specific time when Anne was there, my aunt. And he kicked off the door, come in and hit my mum and everything. And he come with a friend as well. I remember his friend. And he must have hit my mum. I gave him the description of everything anyway. And you know what he turned around and said to me? Like after I've told him everything, and he says, "Well, you turned out all right though, didn't you?" Do you get me? Like, and that was the ultimate test.
I can imagine, yeah.
And like, obviously at this point, I'm a grown man. I'm 24. But I'm like, I was dealing with something because like that's when roundabout I become a Christian. So at that point, I know that the right thing to do is to forgive, not for him, but for me. Like, for me to grow and develop, I need to forgive. But that was the test. Like, do you forgive? Because it was, the joke thing is, at the time, it was only me and him in his caravan because he had been kicked out of his house. So he was living in his caravan. Now, he said this to me at this time, and I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, I should just get him. I should just deal with him. Like, it's only me and him there now. Like, nobody else will know. Like, that was my frame of thought, and it was wrong. But because of what he says, it brought back everything.
Can I imagine?
Do you get me? Because that was the first time I ever spoke to him, and he was laughing like it was a joke. Do you get me? So, like, that was the point where it was like, what am I gonna do? And I had to walk out the caravan. I had to walk out the caravan, like, and come out because I needed a breather.
Let me ask you a question about that though, because I was one of these people as well. I think throughout my teenage years and growing up as a young adult, I was almost waiting for an apology for these issues. Yeah. Not just off my dad, my mum as well, because of certain things that we went through at the time. Yeah. And it's like, that hindered me. Because I never got the apology, I delayed repairing myself. Yeah. Does that make sense? Yeah. So my question is, was you almost waiting for an apology?
Yeah. Like,
did you want him to recognise in what way he hurt you?
Yeah. I did want him to admit, like, you know, the damage that he had done and recognise, you know, he should have played a role. Not that he could fix it, because he can't. It's what's happened, what's done is done.
It's showing accountability, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So it's the situation of, I just wanted him to admit, yeah, he's sorry. More importantly, to recognise to my mum, because the mad thing is, my mum's got a strong character, man. Like, she never used to talk bad of my dad at all. Like, that's good, even after all this happened, that's like, good, man. And I never understood it, and it through my mind, it was like, it always made me think, is there something I don't know? Like, because she always used to say, like, you know, she never really used to say, like, your dad's a bad person or anything like that. But now and then she'd ask me, do you want to speak to your dad? And then I'd make out like, no, I don't. Because if I said that I did, I'd feel like I'm being disloyal to her because of what he did previously. And it feels like, you know, after I've seen what he's done to her and the pain he's put her through, I'm still saying I want to see this man that's done that to my mum.
Do you reckon your mum could have explained it a little bit more to you though? Like, this is what the score is, son. We wasn't like really compatible. He's got his issues and he didn't, you know what I mean? Yeah. And explained it to you a little bit better, where you would have understood it's not an enemy against an enemy. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think she could have, but I think at the same time, she didn't know how to. But at the same time, I think if she did, she must have had feelings like she hates him. She hates this man that's made her life so hard, but she didn't want to show me.
And that's unique, that is, man.
Yeah, like,
it is, yeah.
and it's a strong character to do
Yeah,
that.
of course
So
it
I
is.
could imagine if she was to get into why things are the way they are, she would have to say, you know, he's not a good man. He weren't always that man, and he did used to be a good man beforehand. But so they say, because I don't know him, but then he started drinking. Do you get me? And then once the drink got involved, that's when they say like he changed and everything changed, his temperament, everything. Like he never hit her before that. And then as soon as he did, that's when she left. But I don't even think an apology would have healed the situation that I had, because they say it's fatherless wounds, don't they? They call it fatherless wounds when you haven't grown up with a father.
Deep wounds,
You've got deep wounds, and different characters receive different wounds based on your character. So some kids will take it like, you know, really bad in one area, but another kid won't take it bad in one area.
Yeah.
But all it takes is something that makes you dwell on that situation that you haven't got a father to spark that up. And it could be a thing like we said before, like it could be a sports day and your dad isn't there to represent you. And then that reminds you that actually my dad isn't there. Where is he? He's probably chilling with his family and he's looking after someone else. How comes he can love them kids, but he can't love me? Like, and it leads to that. So then that's when you're internally talking to yourself and you're not saying it to anyone. You're not confiding in anyone, and you come into a reasoning on your own that isn't the actual reality that you're living in, because you're a child trying to work this out. Do you get me?
But it's yeah. But you know the scary thing is out of all of that, bro.
Yeah.
Because there's so many different areas to raising a child that somewhere down the line we're gonna forget something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Keep going.
So my point is, because none of us are perfect, we're gonna miss certain areas where every child in the world is gonna have some kind of childhood issue, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's how do we resolve that?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because and I understand it. It's like, okay, a father that's providing for a family, he's got quite a demanding job. Sometimes the last thing he wants to do is come in the house and play with a child or show them that attention.
Yeah.
That then breeds an issue with the child.
It does.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there's so many other areas of life that we need to be taking care of, that somewhere down the line there's gonna be problems, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
yeah. It does.
It's a scary thing, is what I'm saying.
It is.
No matter how good you think you are as a parent,
yeah,
they're gonna pick up something bad or negative from
it. 100%. Like, and I think it's a tough one, because you can never get parenting 100% right, but you can try and build an environment that helps the child to be the best that they can be, and you can do your best. But on a psychological level, even a spiritual level, I mean, it's been explained how, like, you know, a simple thing like kissing a child on the head can release positive dopamine within the brain, and on a scientific level, I think they did some research into it, and they showed how basically it releases endorphins, which are feel good emotions, the same things that you get from antidepressants, right? So if you feel loved as a child and you're in a loving environment, you're gonna grow different, and your outlook towards life is gonna be more positive. 100%. Do you get me? Like, so
self-esteem, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you love the child, I think that's the most important thing that you should. I think we talked about this before.
Yeah,
it's about the love, and that a child will feel more self-esteem for themselves because they feel loved.
Yeah.
Which is important.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It is.
But take that into a context where you're living in a single parent household where the parents are always working to provide.
Exactly.
And you're not getting that love.
Exactly.
It affects you. You know what I mean? And
exactly.
It affects your confidence, all these things that you can do. Yeah.
And it's the headspace. A parent has only got a certain amount of headspace. Because if this is what I believe, don't get me wrong, I believe single parents can do good, but there's a reason why there was two. There's meant to be two, because that load is too heavy for one person to bear. So I believe that, you know, the mind only has the capacity to hold certain amount of information and to put out a certain amount of information. So if you're engaging with, like, you've got work, you're working 3 jobs, you've got to come home, cook, clean, look after a child, make sure the child's clothes are all done, all these situations that you're doing, that's a 2-man job or a 2-person job. Do you get me? So if that's the case and you're doing that, you're already overstretched. That's like working in a business which really should have 10 employees, but you've only got 2.
Yeah, it's mad.
Everyone's overstretched. So there's going to be some quality that's going to drop slightly as a result, because you can only do so much. So that's why I think a lot of children that are from single parent households, they're missing certain areas simply because, not because the mum wasn't capable, just because the mum has done everything within their power to do. But there's certain elements where, women are more emotional than men. So they naturally feel an emotion of, they get tired. When you get tired, your capacity to do a job lacks. Like it naturally does. Like you just don't perform as well. Like go and train when you're tired compared to when you're feeling fresh. It's two different results. Do you get me? Like it's the same thing.
But the flip side of that though is because I went to school with a lot of middle class kids. Got mum and dad living in a nice area.
Yeah.
Always coming to school with nice trainers, etc. And I used to, at that time, I used to look at it and think, oh, I wish I had a mum and dad. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And whatnot and the other. But growing up and seeing that, I had a different drive to them because I feel like I come not from the gutter, but I come from the bottom.
Yeah.
And I feel like those kind of kids, they didn't have a drive. They didn't have the same drive as what I had.
Yeah.
And I noticed that very early as a kid. You know what I mean? So it swings and roundabouts.
And why do you think that is?
I had it on a plate.
Yeah.
Anytime that new trainers was out in JD, it was 110s and all them things at that time.
Yeah.
They always had the new pair of trainers.
Yeah.
And I used to think, whoa, I look, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they had it on the plate and I didn't. So that gave me the drive to say, you know what? As I get older, I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
I'm going to succeed at this. You know what I mean?
It gives you the drive.
It gives me the drive.
Well, think about it like it's like, I don't know no one, or I know very few that have reached a high level of success or achieved greatness without having some form of like conflict within their life or trauma. Like everybody, whether it's sports, whether it's business, whether it's academics, like to reach a whole level and like be groundbreaking or considered like the best in your field. If you look at Mike Tyson, like for instance, like he come up, was
he a single? Come from a single parent?
He was fostered. His parent left him. Like I think his mum was on. Sure, his mum was on crack, and his dad weren't even there. He never knew his dad. His mum was on crack. He got adopted by Cus D'Amato. He adopted him. Cus D'Amato adopted him, took him in. I think it was at 13. Before that, Tyson was out on the street, like robbing people, brawling, like doing that roads type of stuff, the stuff that you shouldn't be doing. He was living that lifestyle from early, and he was big for his age. So older kids saw him as a threat because he was big. So he was being targeted from then. But Tyson was broken emotionally, and emotionally he's so volatile. That's why he did so many things that biting off ears and all that kind of stuff. Because emotionally he was so volatile because he wasn't stable within, and that's what often happens. Especially if you look in, say, like deprived areas or areas that are considered deprived. The difference between them and affluent areas is children in affluent areas are a bit more well-rounded and in control of their emotions. And that's why consistency in areas that are considered deprived isn't there, because they don't do what they are meant to do because they emotionally get attached to something happens. If they don't feel like it, like
let their emotions override.
Yeah.
And I could say that. I don't know about you, but
I'm the same. But I have to keep it on check. But I used to be a lot worse. Like I'd say now I'm more consistent just because I try to live by those principles. But originally I wasn't. But that's something I had to recognize. Do you get me? Because you're volatile, because you're based on emotions all the time, and it's like the littlest thing can throw you off. Someone could say something to you and then knock your confidence, so you take it to heart. Next thing you know, you're telling yourself these voices in your head, and again it comes to what you tell yourself, because everyone speaks to themselves in some kind of way. They either say I can or I can't, and everyone has one or the other. So like if you're telling yourself you can't more than you are telling yourself that you can, then that means that a past experience is suppressing who you could actually become and develop into because of that.
It's imagine because I think because I never had a dad, or not so much a dad. Okay, just say I never had a dad. I think there's certain principles that a man should be teaching a man. Like Simon Sinek about the compound effect. His dad broke up with his mum at the time, and so it was just his dad raising him and his sister. But his dad was a sports teacher, so every morning he'd get up and that consistency of doing exercising, and that bred into him. That bred into him. So he then translated that into business. Does that make sense? So there's certain principles that I feel like that I didn't have or wish that I had as a kid. Growing up and to have that consistency. And it's crazy because you talk about Mike Tyson. He had the talent, but he never had that emotional. He never had that emotional grounding to ground him.
Exactly. And that's the thing.
And that's mad.
And even if you look at his life, And the way he went, as soon as he did get that from Costa Yamato and he set certain principles, then all of a sudden he's on the route to world champion. And then he becomes world champion.
That's mad, that is.
But what's mad is, and it shows that it always comes back if you don't keep a hold on it, is as soon as Costa Yamato died, he lost that. The next you know, he lost to Buster Douglas, who knocked him out in Tokyo, simply because Costa Yamato wasn't there to keep him grounded and have those principles. The father figure wasn't there. That's when he went off the walls and met his wife, and all that kind of stuff happened with Robin Givens. And
he was about 19 at that time, isn't it?
Yeah.
They're still young.
Yeah,
still
he's the youngest world champion.
So you can't even use it.
Heavyweight world champion ever. So it's like you've always got that. Whereas if you look at him now as a grown man, he's a total different. He's a highly intelligent person. Tyson is, and people don't see that because people think intelligence is academics, and that isn't intelligence at all. I know some of the most I know people with multiple PhDs that I wouldn't consider more intelligent than someone that hasn't even got a GCSE.
Yes, man.
Do you get me? Like, it's just because they can learn information and regurgitate it on a test in a way that people want to receive it doesn't mean that they're more intelligent than the next person. Like, there's so many different levels to intelligence. You got emotional intelligence, which often gets left out. And
I think that's the most important thing, you know.
Exactly.
And that's only coming from where I come from, innit? You know what I mean?
Exactly. If you haven't got no emotional intelligence, you can have academics all you want, but you ain't going to get nowhere because you're not going to be consistent. And something's going to happen, knock you off road, and then you're going to go off the tracks.
Explain emotional intelligence, though, for somebody who's listening who doesn't necessarily or hasn't been aware of emotional intelligence.
Yeah. So emotional intelligence to me, as far as I understand it, is the ability to no matter what anyone says to you or no matter what life throws at you, it will affect you to a degree, but it won't stick with you. Like some people, what they will do, something will happen in life, it will set them back, and they dwell on it, and then they'll fall into that victim mindset. And they'll either say, oh, I can't do this, I don't believe in myself, and then they'll always need to be reaffirmed, or they always need someone to tell them, yes, you can. They need a cheerleader, and things like that, because they haven't got the emotional intelligence to look within themselves and evaluate what is the problem, is it me, and then deal with that problem and make the adjustments that they need to make. Do you get me? And that's the problem.
I agree with you. I think emotional intelligence is recognizing how you feel and dealing with it, and recognizing how somebody else feels, and showing empathy. That to me is emotional intelligence. You know what I mean?
I think empathy is a big one when it's involving somebody else.
Because often it's about reflecting and trying to help other people emotionally as well. And I think that's how I kind of explain emotional intelligence, if that makes sense. That makes perfect sense. You know what I mean?
And that's one of the biggest gifts I believe that you can give to a child, because
100%.
if a child hasn't got that emotional intelligence,
100%.
they're going to be looking outward for approval. And that's what often leads to, when kids get into teens and they start hanging around with the wrong crowds, because they haven't got the emotional intelligence and they want to be accepted. Everybody wants that, one of the fundamental needs of a human is that sense of belonging, right? That is one of the most fundamental things that everybody seeks out. And I mean, there's so many scientific studies and psychological studies that prove that belonging is the biggest need. Marketing companies use that sense of belonging. If you look at multiple companies, if they build a culture of belonging, then you can build a business and you can build a following from that belonging alone. Do you get me? That's why you've got, say, like, there's people that love Apple and then there's people that love PC. But if you put those two together and one will say, nah, Apple's the best, and then another will say PC, and they're ready to go to war over this debate because they feel they've got a sense of belonging. Do you get me? Because they've built that culture. Do you get me? And I think that's one of the most important things you can build a child, where they're emotionally switched on to the point where they get a sense of belonging from something, but it doesn't cloud their vision. Because if you're emotionally attached to something, just like love, when people are in love and their partner's abusive or their partner's cheating and they don't want to believe it, love can blind them. The same way as not having that emotional intelligence to navigate through life can also blind you with certain situations. Do you get me?
I recently read and found out actually that in order to try and help your child to be more emotionally intelligent, when you're having an argument with your missus or something, for example, and then both people are shouting and screaming, it's just about telling each other how you feel and how you can rectify that. And that's just a really simple thing that you can do. And I learned it and I thought, wow, you kind of incorporate that into your relationships, and not just your relationship, but how you deal with things with everybody.
It is.
It's about talking about how you feel and then a step to resolving it.
Exactly.
If that makes
Exactly.
sense. Yeah.
And it's a hard thing to do because,
Of course it is.
I mean, I read something similar in a book, and it was talking about parenting, and it was talking about when a child cries. When a child cries, there's a reason why they're crying, because they're feeling a certain type of emotion. They can't explain the emotion that they're feeling, and they don't understand why, but they cry because they think, it's the end of the world. But if you sit with a child and you ask them and help them to recognize the emotion that they're feeling, are you feeling angry? Are you feeling sad? Are you feeling upset? Are you feeling discouraged? Are you feeling like I don't love you? Are you feeling like nobody loves you? Like, you've got to help them to understand that, because then whatever type of understanding you give them when they're young, that's going to be the foundation for them for when they grow up. Because as they grow, they're either going to recognize it as, I'm the problem because I don't understand these emotions that I'm feeling. And then they're going to go to an escapism, a form of escapism, which is often, it's, as an adult, it's often like sex, drugs, work, sometimes training.
Those three things that you said are the most of the things that we, especially as men, we throw ourselves into that.
Exactly. And people escape into that to deal with emotions that they're feeling. And especially with lockdown, if you look at lockdown now, how people are like changing, people are acting so out of character.
It's mad.
Because we're in an environment that is unknown. It's an unknown environment in unprecedented times. Like,
it's not healthy. To be
it's
fair.
not. It's not healthy, and a lot of people don't. When they're locked in their house and they're told they can't go out or they can't do certain things, it's like, well, what do I do now? I'm left here with these emotions. I've never felt them before, or I've never had to face them before, because I've always had this distraction. I've always had this social thing that distracts me.
I was talking to somebody the other day, and I was like, I'd hate to be rich, because say things were normal and you're rich, you're gonna put so much distraction in your life because you can afford to. You can go on vacation, you can go wherever you want to, and there's so much distraction. It takes you away from who you are as a person.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I was thinking about this. You know what I mean? So, because lockdown's been bad, but on the flip side, it's been good. It's taken away that distraction. So if you're a person that likes to face up and to see things for what they really are, this would have been a good time for you to do that.
Exactly.
Because all the distractions are taken away and you're faced with what you need to be faced with. So that's been a good thing. It's been the blessing in disguise, really. For me. But there's so much distraction that we put in our lives as people, which takes us away from who we are. It's unreal. You know what I mean?
So what would you say are the two most powerful events in your life that have shaped your worldview and shaped who you are today?
That's a really good question. The two biggest, I think number one has got to be, children's got to be in there. And I think the events of me being my parents, what I didn't receive as a kid, because I'm not going to sit here and go into great detail, but obviously I've had problems with both my mum and dad, and especially through teenagers, kind of felt like alone in a certain sense. So that experience there shaped me to be more driven, more independent, more ambitious. But what it also did is it didn't help me to face the emotional side that I needed to face with that. If that makes sense. So I went through teenage years trying to reach this goal of being really successful, you know what I mean, and trying to be this look at me shining kind of person. And I think that's played off into the sense of the ambition side, maybe because I didn't get the love and the care that I probably needed as a kid. So I'm trying to always shine to get that recognition. Which is not a bad thing to a certain degree. That independence where I don't need anybody. And I had this idealistic view of, I want to be this businessman, I want to have a family, you know what I mean? It was idealistic. I never really looked at things of how they should have been. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
As Papa, I'm to a degree, I'm still idealistic. I look at things and I think, this is what it's got to be, you know what I mean? So I think that shaped me to be who I became as an adult. And then having kids, then I started asking myself the question, well, if I haven't received like the parenting that I feel like is the right kind of parenting, how can I then give that to my kids? Does that make sense? Because then we start overdoing things like overcompensating certain things. You might have not received a lot of love as a kid, so what you then do is you show too much love to your kids. Even if that's a thing. If that makes sense, you know what I mean? or I don't know, or you didn't get that many presents, or you didn't feel like you didn't. So you then start buying kids all these things and spoiling them. You know what I mean? And there's that sort of thing. So that I started questioning quite from an early age. From when I had my daughter, I was 26 or 27. Why I'm not even ready to be a dad. So you then start questioning, well, what do I think's missing?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Where do I start with that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's
And
true, you know.
so I think the two.
Yeah.
What about yourself?
I mean, I'll probably say my youngest one. Well, it's my earliest one. The one that shaped my worldview and in a negative way was my earliest memory, which was obviously like my dad hitting my mum coming through the door. That shaped my worldview in the sense of it gave me a lot of negative things, but also it's gave me a lot of things that have helped me as I've older. Like resilience is like I believe I am strong minded, and I believe I'm very focused and independent. But at the same time, there's bad traits that come with that. Like in the sense of like, you know, when me and Stacey like first got together, I wouldn't leave myself vulnerable at first. Like I wouldn't talk about certain feelings that I had or what I really think or what I really feel, because that's leaving me vulnerable. That isn't what I would back then consider a man. Do you get me? So because of that, I had to deal with that and get rid of that and address it as an adult. But at the same time, that mindset got me through like school comfortably. Like if anything, I was like, I was the popular kid in school. I was the kid, you know, like I could handle myself and everybody knew it, and I never really had no problems in school. And all that kind of built me up to the point where I am now, and it is egotistical because again I understand I have got a big ego.
I think we all
And yeah, like
to a certain degree. Yeah, we are.
But mine is just big, bro. And it's a downfall. It's a downfall, and now I've learned how to control it. But when it comes, I've controlled it with relationships with people. But you see, like if something goes wrong, say if you got goals, and something goes wrong and it's a setback, my mindset is I'm gonna get there regardless. Put my gum shield up. Let's work. Standard. Like that's my mindset.
That's your resilience.
Yeah, and that's the resilience. So in that sense, it's good. But in the same time, I wouldn't go to say like Stacey and ask for help for certain things, or I wouldn't go to like a friend and ask for help. Do you get me? I just don't do it.
And that's where you think that your ego's playing the counter against you.
Yeah. And whereas really, like that's why certain things are even team sports. I don't necessarily do good in team sports because I think to myself, like, if they're not putting in the same level of work as I am, and they're not meeting my expectations, again coming back down to that, then I'm put off by them because then it feels like I'm carrying the team.
It's mad, you know.
Do you get me? So there's that as well. Do you get me? Like it's mad.
It's mad.
And I think that's why I struggle within the workplace dynamics, as in an office, a typical office, because I would consider myself, not being boastful or nothing, but I would consider myself a high performer in the sense of like I'm not done until the task is done. Whereas in a 9 till 5, most people are done when it's 5.
But
do you think they're locking off?
Do you think that plays a part from where we come from? Because most of the you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because when we was growing up, everybody was about themselves, you know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
True,
there weren't no team.
It is.
Everybody was hustling to do what they wanted to do. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
do you think that's part of where you come from?
I think it is, and I think that's another life journey. I think that's another part that adds to who I am today, like that hustler's mentality, and where, like, you know, in the hustler's mentality, when you're doing things that you shouldn't be and you're hanging around with certain characters, and all of them are messed up in some way, shape, or form, man. Had some kind of trauma. You have to be doing that and to be comfortable in it. Do you get me? Like, to be comfortable in any moment you could die, like, and any moment someone could run in on your house and do something or anything like that. To be comfortable with that and be normal and kind of normalize it, you've got to be twisted in some kind of way, because no person that's, you know, well-rounded is going to stay in that world.
Yeah.
And I think having that element of, you know, you can't trust your friends that you're running with, because if they get hungry enough and something isn't going well in their life and they're not getting money and they see you with money, they might set you up on a low. They might set you up and a situation might arise where they're thinking, I could get that from him.
It's a survival, though, to a certain degree.
It's survival of the fittest. That is the rawest. Survival of the fittest.
It is, man.
But on a flip side, because I've been in that world and now I'm in the business world and my mindset's totally different, I believe I have a different mindset to the average person within business, and I have the advantage, so to speak. Just because it's hard to explain, but I think that resilience from, you know, not relying on anyone and not having anyone to like really turn to and trust, it boosts your work ethic. Your work ethic is like, it's through the roof compared to everyone else. Like I said, like people lock off at 5. I'm not finishing until the task is done. And if I don't know the answer, I'm going to find out, or I'm going to go to someone that does. Do you get me? Like, and that's the mindset. Whereas, not saying everyone that grew up in a cushy background hasn't got work ethic, but what I'm saying is, most of the time, people that have come from nothing, they will outwork someone else.
100%.
Do you get me? Like,
what's the famous one? Rock bottom teaches you more than mountaintops.
Yeah. That's it. That's it, bro. That's good saying. It is. It's true.
Truth, yeah.
It's true. And
do you think then? Because we said that, you know, you touched on that, you know, no one would really touch you in school. Is masculinity, for example, looked at differently? Because we'll talk about Man of Velvet, Man of Steel.
Yeah, great book that is.
Great book.
Yeah,
it is a great book.
Probably the best book on manhood.
I refer to it
like,
that still, and I've had it a few years.
Man of Steel, Man of Velvet. You can't even get it no more.
Like, can you not get it?
No, you can only get them used.
Yeah.
Because they're like they're not even in production anymore. I think it was written. Was it in the 70s or 60s?
It's an old book. I can't remember who, but
it's a good book, and a lot of people, well, some people would probably read that and say like it's too swaying towards the male's perspective. But I don't think it is.
It's a man. It's a book for a man. So
that's what I mean.
I don't see it any other way.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, but in today's day and age, you know how people like to go on.
Yeah. But because we never had that father figure, so to speak. Are most men who come from that background just men of steel and look at masculinity as just men of steel? Because there's a softer side to that as well.
Yeah. That's the thing.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, just to give the audience some context.
Yeah.
So the book talks about, you know, Man of Steel, Man of Velvet, in the sense of there's two sides to a man. There should be. But most of the time, most men are either steel or they're velvet. And what they mean by steel is, you know, the tough, hard face, doesn't show emotions.
You could kind of almost say alpha male, beta male.
Yeah, alpha male, beta male.
Yeah,
it is literally that.
You could say that.
Yeah, like you've got the alpha male, which is very like dominant and stern and very one way inclined, and masculine as in like, you know, they don't really show emotion, don't really say like things like I love you and stuff like that.
They look like a man. So so you perceive them to be the man, if that makes sense. Which
if you're complaining about something, they'll probably say like, you know, get down, give me 20 press-ups, man up. Like they're that kind of man. Do you get me? Whereas you've got the other side, which is the velvet, which they're a bit more tapped into the feminine side, and they're a bit more emotional in what they deal with. And I think that's a different side to it. Whereas a beta male is more emotional, and a beta male I would consider, not all betas are like this, but a lot of beta males are yes men.
Yes men.
Yeah. And they're more like they want to keep the peace. They don't want to ruffle feathers and say what needs to be said. And often internally as a man, that ruins them, because ultimately they're piling up issues on top of issues that are going unaddressed. And then all of a sudden they have a blowout. Something happens, and it might be something minor, but it's the last straw because of all these accumulative things that have happened throughout life. Next thing you know, they run away, or I don't know, they commit suicide, or they do something that's totally out of character because it's a build-up.
Yeah, sure.
Now, this book, it teaches you that a man should have both Man of Steel and Man of Velvet. So you should have the steel when those situations and moments arise, but also you should have velvet and be loving and caring.
Empathetic.
There's
all those kind of things. Yeah.
And it goes into a lot of detail. I haven't read it for a while, but
it talks about your place as a protector, what you place as a man in society. Does that make sense? And etc. But what I'm saying is, because we never had that, do you think that we kind of used to try to be this alpha male?
Oh yeah. So, again, and I think I probably still do to a degree. Like I'm probably swaying towards more alpha male, and that's probably why I did, like, you know, when you're in school, you want to challenge every male to see who's the baddest in the year. Do you get me?
Yeah.
And when you wanna make out who's the baddest in the year, it's like you're just challenging everyone for the alpha male. Because if you are the baddest in the year, as in fighting, you are the alpha male. Like you're the one that all the other males want to be like, and you're the one most of the time that all the females want.
Yeah.
And it is that thing of, you know, like a gorilla, a silverback is the alpha male. Like, and the silverback gets the pick of all the women. Do you get me? And it's also, the silverback is admired and looked up to by all the other males, and you want that position. You consider that position that, like, that is what is a man. Which, don't get me wrong, I think a man should have an element of that if you're a leader. But at the same time, that isn't just what a man is. There's more to it. And I mean, I think personally, the perfect example of a man is Jesus. Like, a lot of people would agree with that, but regardless of what you think, whether you believe in Jesus and God and whatever you like, if you look at the character of Jesus, like, no one can flaw his character and the things he did, in the sense of
Perfect.
who he is and how he come across. Like, you know, when a woman come to him and she says about the death of her brother Lazarus, and she's explaining the death, he heard it and he cried with her. There's something special about that. Like,
Of course it is, bro.
like, there's something
Of course
unique
it is.
about it, whereas most men wouldn't. But at the same time, when he saw someone like selling goods in his father's temple, and he saw this, and it was the money changers, and it was making money and everything in there, even though there was a group of them, he still went head in and flipped the tables and threw the money everywhere, even though there was a group. And so that shows the alpha male coming out and being aggressive when they need to be aggressive.
I kind of see it as,
But it's righteous aggression.
yeah. So basically he showed tough love when he needed to show tough love.
Yeah.
And soft love when he needed to do soft love.
Yeah.
And it wasn't gender specific.
Yeah.
It was calling at the right time. And that's what we kind of learning to be around a person, if that makes sense.
Exactly.
Or around a man.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But yeah. It's mad. It's crazy.
It is crazy.
It is crazy.
It is.
Yeah.
And that's why this question is such a deep one. And I mean, we could delve into like loads of, there's so many different areas that make up our characters as well.
Yeah.
Like, that have happened throughout life. I mean, there's things to do with, like, you know, your first relationship with a woman. Like, there's things to do with, like,
That's a deep one, that is.
yeah, like that's a topic within itself.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Then you've got other things like the first time you was praised, really, like, as in for your either academic achievements or some kind of achievement that you had. You put your all into something and it was recognized. Like, that first time when someone says, "Well done, you're good at that." Like, and when you first hear that, that really either pushes you on, or some people, they just coast and just stick with it. Do you get me? And they don't really discover what they really like. They just go with what everyone tells them that they're good at. Because there's a lot of people now, even to this day as adults, they're doing something that they're good at, but they don't necessarily enjoy. Like, there's plenty of people that are working jobs that they can't stand. Like, they can't stand the job, but they're good at the job. But really, they'd like to do something else. But they don't get a chance to do that something else because they think it won't pay the bills. Even though in today's day and age...
I've been a victim of that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In what way?
Music.
Yeah, true.
Creative arts, anything, because I think I recognise that from a young age. I love drawing, so I used to free draw and draw cartoons and stuff. So I've always, and then it went to the music, but I just think it's something that society doesn't push. Not just music, creative, anything. You know what I mean? So doing anything that's gonna create. It could be a drummer. You know, how do you become a drummer full time and get paid a decent amount of money and still live?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I struggled with that a long time, and at the moment I'm still using my academic side to pay for what I need to pay for, but still working on it. Often you can't have to do two things to make them work.
Until one pays off.
Yeah. So.
And I was the same. Like, I used to work a job, and not putting down a job or anything, but I used to work the job, and the business that I worked for, a lot of the time it was like, there's a simple solution to a problem. They'd have 20 meetings and still nothing would happen. Do you get me? Like, and I'd think to myself, you know what, you could just deal with this quickly if you dealt with it the way that you should. And they just didn't. So that frustrated me and led me to build a business on the side of working on my job. So I'd come home from my job and I'd work like 5 till whatever time at night to do my marketing business, to market the businesses that I wanted to market for, to do the solutions. And that kind of like led me to go into the path that I am now, where I've got a digital agency and that's what we do full time. But even that, like, on marketing now, it's turned to, like, because the finances are coming in and there's a lot of money that comes in, but I'm working for businesses to market their thing. It's not mine.
You still haven't. It's fair to say that you're still trying to find what that unique gem of what yours is. Yeah.
Yeah. But whereas this is what led me to start this podcast, I believe, because this is more me. This is more like who I am. Like when I'm with you or when I'm with friends or when I'm with my personal networks, these are the types of things that we discuss. These are the things that interest me. Like I read about these in my spare time while I'm not getting paid. No one don't have to pay me to do this. Like I enjoy it. If I can get paid, bonus. But that isn't the goal. Like I actually enjoy it. Do you get me? Like so, and if I believe that's one of my God-given gifts, like to be able to recognize certain things and be able to convey that message to somebody else that could help their life, then that's a win. Like for me, that's like a bonus. Like I have people messaging me all the time that I work with, and you know, you give them some advice, they put it into action, it changes their life. But to us, it's like it's normal. But to them, it's like they've never heard someone say that before. Do you get me? They've never been inspired, and no one's even said a simple thing like, "I believe that you can." Like even something simple as that.
It's rare, you know.
Like that's what I mean.
It's like earlier we were saying about when did you get recognition? I've been sitting there thinking, well, when was that? You know.
Yeah, for real.
Honestly, yeah. Quick question though. So, what could you say is still an issue from your story that you're dealing with now, and what are you doing to resolve it?
Boy, that's a good question.
It's still alive, is it? It's still alive. It's
I think you're always continually dealing with things because you think you've dealt with things. My thing is respect. Like if I feel that I've been disrespected or somebody hasn't shown me the respect I feel I'm owed, it warps my my how can I say it? It warps my perception of that person.
I understand where you're coming from.
So that perception of that person goes down a level if they don't show me respect, which is natural. Most people do that. But for me, that comes back to having high expectations of everybody else. Because I have expectations of myself, I have high expectations for everybody else. So say, for instance, like say if I say, I don't know, oh, Wes, do you want to go climb a mountain? And you're like, yeah, I'm on it, bro. I'm on it. Right. We go to climb a mountain. Right. It comes to the day. And then you're like, nah, I ain't climbing a mountain, you know, bro. And then I'm like, rah, like I'm ready to climb this mountain. And I've got high expectations of you because I know that you can, but you don't have it of yourself. And then that will warp my reality of that person, although it shouldn't. And the truth of it is, you should be there regardless, and I shouldn't lower my standard because I can't have the same expectations that I have for myself for you, because you're different. Do you get me?
No,
but
I hear it.
that's an internal thing, and you tell yourself that story in your head to the point where it can build an issue between you and other people.
So
do you get me?
And what you're talking about is respect, because I understand that man needs respect, woman needs love. I think that's generally, man.
Yeah.
But where do you think that's been picked up in your story? Where's the respect? Do you think that's been picked up for you to be the way you are in that sense now?
I think it's probably it might be from society and school. You know, like it might be from society and school, because when I went to school, secondary school specifically, academically I was quite capable of doing work, and my predicted grades were all A stars. I left school with no GCSEs, right? Now, that's because I was doing bad things when I was young, and I shouldn't have been doing bad things, and I wasn't even attending school most of the time. But I was still reading, I was still learning, and I was still, in my opinion, academically better than most. And because it was so easy, I messed around in school. But also, I didn't understand at the time, I'm a creative by nature. Like by design, my character prototype is a creative prototype. I'm a visionary. I'm someone that I have to create. I'm not academic as in sit me down and write. Like that isn't me. I'm more of a creative, but because it wasn't nurtured and I was always told go this route, but I would say actually this is what I want to do, this is what I prefer, and they'd turn around and say, because I was a young black kid, oh, why don't you go into this, go into construction, you know, like go into this, and they had low expectations of me. So I felt that was disrespectful. I feel when someone's having low expectations of me as a person, that's them disrespecting my intelligence and what I'm capable of. More or less, you're saying you're aiming too high. Don't aim there. So that to me is disrespectful. So I reckon I got that thing of always wanting to be respected and having a high expectation of myself because nobody else outside of my mum and my aunt had an high expectation of me.
That's interesting.
Do you get me?
That's interesting.
And I think that's the core of it.
That's interesting.
And I've just literally figured that out
Yeah,
on the
because
podcast.
you have to.
Because I'm asking
Yeah,
the
you have
question.
to ask the questions.
Yeah,
innit?
I'm
You know what I mean?
literally
And it's
just
interesting.
reflecting now.
Yeah,
like,
and
and
that's what
I've
we're
never
here.
really thought of it that way.
Yeah,
And it's only when you say it out loud that it makes sense in your head, and that's where it comes from. But yeah, like I would definitely say that because
It's
you know,
mad,
it's like,
you know, man. It's mad. I and I love my mum,
yeah,
but I almost felt like she kind of wanted to not sabotage me. No, that's the wrong word. She said things without really realizing how that would affect.
yeah,
So I kind of felt disrespected in my household,
Yeah.
let alone society.
yeah,
Does that make sense?
yeah, that makes sense.
And I feel like that's probably had a little internal. That's why I've had an internal battle because I'm big on respect.
Yeah,
If I feel disrespected, that's my emotions.
Yeah.
I get I get red.
Yeah,
I see red.
which is understandable.
Like really,
Yeah.
like and like that's about emotional intelligence and handling my emotions. But I had the same problem.
Yeah,
But I'm trying to down figure it because I'm sitting there figuring, well, when's that happened to me? Because
yeah,
it probably was in my household and society as well.
yeah,
And school. That's a story I go back to. My tutor actually made me sign a piece of paper to say I'll be working in McDonald's.
really.
That was the level.
No way.
That was the level of expectation that he had of me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And that's what often happens. You see, like, this is the thing. Like, if you take all these variables into account, because that's just one variable of your life that happened then.
Yeah.
But that's because we grew up in an area that's considered deprived.
Yeah.
So a lot of the time when you're going into schools and these teachers, their outlook of you is you're from a deprived area, you're a young black kid, you're probably not going to aim high, and they just want quick results to send you off to college so they can say that you went wherever, so they can get funding for their school. So they're trying to basically just, like, they're not telling you to be the best that you can be and push. They're not trying to do that because they're just putting you in a bracket.
It's mad.
That's what people do.
It's mad.
And because of that, that just adds on the issues that you've picked up from life anyway.
It's
So it isn't
mad.
even like, you know,
It's mad.
like I can't remember. There's a couple of positive teachers from a primary school that I had
Mm-hmm.
that always told me, like, you know, you can do what you want. Like Mr. Kelly. I remember Mr. Kelly 100%. But also I remember a teacher called Mr. Mail. And I remember everyone went for a test at CTC school. And like I went for the test at CTC school at the time. Cara did and Stefan. And Stefan got in. Me and Cara didn't. Do you get me? And I think it was down to one question when they ask you a question around like you're going away to a planet, and when you go to this planet, there's aliens there. Would you stay on that planet or would you come back home to your mum? Right.
Is that the question?
That was what the question. I remember it.
You
to
remember
this
that's
day.
mad? 'Cause I went for the same test. I don't even remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I remember. And I says, and he's looking at me because I knew I did well on everything else. And he's looking at me, and my mum was there. I says, I'll come back to my mum because like my mum was a single parent, so I ain't leaving my mum.
You had that kind of
attachment.
Yeah.
But I know, and I knew the right answer in my head. I knew the right answer was possibly that you'd say that you'd stay there and explore because they want kids that are going to be more of the exploring type to go out there and venture. Because most of the time they're probably thinking like you're more likely to go to uni. I don't know whether that's how they actually worked it out.
Oh, that's true.
But that's how I was thinking in my head. But I knew to him I said the wrong answer because as soon as I said that, he started making notes and he was frowning. I could tell from his body language that it was the wrong answer. And the next thing you know, I got the letter and it says you never got in. But I remember Mr. Mail says one day when all the kids in class in Yorkswood School that was messing around, and he turned around and says he had a little rant because he got angry. No one was listening, so he went mad. He was old school, like he went mad. And he's turned around and says, this is why out of 3 people that went to CTC, 1 got in because none of you ever listen. So he's basically pointing at me and Cara.
Yeah.
Do you get me? Like, and he was basically pointing that lesson at us, and everyone else was looking at us because we. And the funny thing is, we was the 3 only black kids that went to that school.
Mad.
The 3 only black kids that tried to get into that school.
And that's mad.
And I'm not saying like he was racist or anything, but because I don't believe he was at all. But what I'm saying is, little nuggets like that, they stick with you, and that makes you think. You know, when I was going into senior school, I'm thinking, is it me? And it's that self-doubt. And those little bits of self-doubt where, you know, that's a narrative that's agreeing with the self-doubt that you already have.
It's mad.
Because you've gone through things in life.
It's mad.
It's like, it's another baggage it's another bag that I'm picking up and putting on my shoulder along with all the other stuff that I've got.
But on top of that, you're picking up on the guidance of whoever you're under the guidance of. They're throwing their issues onto you. Because you never know that teacher.
Exactly.
Then you've got your childhood issue, because I'm just painting a picture now. Then you've got your childhood issues that you picked up.
Yeah.
And then you've got this big society.
Exactly.
So you've got all these different angles where all this is coming to you, and and it's shaping you and your view of perception.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's mad.
And your view of perception isn't exactly reality.
Yeah, I know.
And that's the other thing, because that's the other thing that you was actually talking about. And when you were saying about, the idealistic way and reality.
Yeah.
That
killed me off that, did.
Yeah, and everyone's got that. Like, it's like when you grow up without a dad, you've got an ideal idea of what a dad is, and it's this fantasy thing of the perfect dad that comes home, plays sports with you, like always happy, always this. And reality, no one's dad is like that.
Yeah,
like
true,
nobody. But you have that idea because what you see is what you see on films, the snapshot. It's like looking at people's lives on Instagram. You only see the best bits of people's lives. So your perception is that their life is always like that. Now that's the idealistic view. But the reality is very different.
Truth.
And if you would have went off the reality when you was younger, you would have ended up turning out differently. But in hindsight, as an adult, you can look at things like realistically. You understand the realistic world we live in.
Yeah.
And because of that, we can now navigate it better. And our mental health as a result is also better because, everyone isn't living their best life, the Instagram life.
It's mad.
Do you get me?
Yeah. Because even when I thought about having children as a teenager, so to speak, and I ended up having my daughter outside of marriage. We broke up, not even in a relationship.
Yeah.
That killed me, that did,
Really?
Because my idea of building up to that image of having children and...
Yeah. Perfect family.
Yeah,
unit.
yeah.
Yeah,
So,
well, realistically, it don't.
So instead of me trying to step up to the plate and just think, yo, I got to raise my kid, I'm constantly butting heads with my daughter's mum.
Yeah.
Because my idea of how this should be is not being matched.
Yeah.
Does that make
exactly.
sense?
So again, it comes down to expectations not being met.
Yeah.
It always comes down to that, every single time.
I'm a bit, it's one of them. It's a bit, I don't know with expectation.
Yeah.
If I'm honest with you.
Yeah.
Because if you place too much expectation on something, you're always going to be disappointed.
Yeah.
And not everybody's going to be living. Nobody's living to your standard of the way of living.
True.
100%.
100%. And that's one of my issues. I've only just realised that. This is the thing.
I've learned it. Yeah.
I've only just realised and accepted that, and I'm still dealing with it in some situations. And that's why I can laugh about it now. But when you're going through it,
serious?
you don't, and you don't. You just have to grind and just deal with it. But
so then it's a case of, well, should we put expectations on people? And we talked about this before.
Yeah.
I don't think we should.
Yeah, I think we should to a degree. There's fundamental expectations, like I says, like there's, if you've got a partner and it's your wife, you expect them not to cheat.
Yeah, there's unwritten rules.
Do you get me? Or you expect them to show respect to you. You expect them to act a certain way with you, and those fundamental things. But when it comes to the more trivial matters that are down to character, like should they be ambitious as you?
Yeah,
that's something that's different because that's their character. Maybe they wanna, they just want a job that they're ticking over, and they're just happy to get one pay thing, and they're not really looking for their purpose.
And that's all good for some people.
Yeah.
If they wanna do that.
And there's nothing wrong with that. If that's their character mode.
Yeah.
But if you've got an issue within yourself, which I did used to have, where I expect Stacey to live up to my standard of, she's got to be driven, have multiple sources of income, multiple things. She's got that was realistic. I was literally like that, and I used to push her to do things that and I used to get upset when she weren't doing it on her own. It's like I used to feel like, well, why am I pushing her? Why don't she see it herself? Well, I didn't understand that, but now I understand it a bit more. Don't get me wrong, I'm still pushy with some things, and I've got to deal with that. But we're all different. But ultimately, I'm supportive. You know what it is? I think I see the best in people that they don't see in themselves.
Yeah.
And when I see someone not living to their full potential, it does my head in. It makes me think to myself, somebody either hasn't encouraged them or shown them, or they don't have the self-esteem to believe that they're capable of doing something. And if that's the case, they're not living their purpose. Because I believe everyone's got a purpose in life. Everyone's got different skills, talents, and abilities. But I believe that most people are not using them. They're only using 50% of their potential.
And it's mad. Going back on that, I don't think it's a bad thing that you like that, but you've got to do it with love and encouragement. You know what I mean? So if you see somebody's got some kind of talent or skill inside of them, and you want to develop that, and you want to help them, that's not a bad thing. But then to place an expectation on them to do that is kind of not right, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah.
Does that
It's
make
true.
sense? Yeah.
100%.
But I'm still learning again, back to the emotions and love and empathy and all that sort of stuff. That's almost like you could say soft skill. I'm trying to develop that.
Yeah.
It's not. It doesn't come easy.
And it is a hard skill.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I think we've delved into that quite a lot. Like
a lot,
yeah. There's so many other things we could have gone into, but we don't want this podcast to be too long. But we might even do a part 2 to this.
I think it's that thing that you touched on earlier. You know, when you said your first partner.
Yeah.
That's
a whole topic.
That's a deep one. That is.
Yeah. That's a whole topic on its own.
Especially for women as well, you know.
Yeah.
Because if I've known or noticed that women that get into the first relationship is an abusive relationship, tend to carry that trait on.
Yeah.
They get with abusive partners.
Definitely.
And it's trying to understand why that is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And it's the same thing I said before. I was speaking to Stacey the other day. Certain women attract certain types of men because certain men see that a woman hasn't got self-esteem. Do you get me? Like, so a weak man will see that and see that like as prey, and they prey on that.
That's deep.
Do you get me?
Yeah.
And that's why they attract a certain men that go on a certain way. I'm not saying that women deserve anything that they receive, but what I'm saying is men and even women see certain traits in different people and they think I can exploit that.
Or help.
Yeah, or help that. Like, so there's two different things.
There is.
But we'll do another topic on that another time.
Just to wrap this up though.
Yeah.
In terms of anybody who wants to then dive down into these childhood issues that we're talking about in terms of them trying to progress forward in life, what advice, what references could you give somebody where they can look or etc.? Does that make sense?
One of the references, it depends on what you're trying to deal with in life. In the sense of addiction, let's talk about addiction, because addiction is one of the things. And I'm not just talking, drugs and alcohol, which most people think of addiction. Sex and all that. Well, I'm not just talking about that. There's other forms of addiction that are socially acceptable in society and that aren't seen as an addiction, but actually are, and are holding people back. Like simple things like even training. Like there's people that get obsessive with training and they're in the mirror all the time and they're juicing up or taking something or they're obsessed with it and it plays on their mental health. I mean, the amount of people that me and you know that have committed suicide because it come down to they don't think they was big enough or they don't believe they're as good of an image as they should be. A lot of the time it's internal issues that they're covering up and all that type of stuff. But one of the things that I'd say 100%, and I think I did give it as part of advice for the last one as well, was to write down all the events that have happened within your life that have been traumatic events that you feel have shaped your perception of who you are today. Write down all these events and it's going to be hard, but if it's that hard for you and you don't feel you can do it on your own, as some people shouldn't, they shouldn't do it on their own. They should seek professional help. Some people should go to counselling. There's nothing wrong with counselling, because everybody needs someone to talk to, everyone needs something to sound something off to. Like I have my aunt. I also used to go to a minister and speak to him because he always had advice. John Meekin always had loads of good advice. My aunt
John.
Yeah, John had loads of good advice. Sometimes he'd tell you some things and it would make you sit back and rah. That's so obvious, but you missed it. But I'd 100% say that, and then I'd say build an action plan to gradually dealing with these things and talk with those around you that you love. Because a lot of the time, these issues that you have, it won't be the random person out on the street or out in the workplace that you'll take them out on. It would be those that you love around you.
Yeah, 100%.
Do you get me?
Yeah,
and if you really want to be the best person you can be for those that are around you, then you need to deal with these issues, because as you get older, you're just going to accumulate more, because more things of trauma or things like not going your way or life not meeting the expectations that you had is going to happen. It's inevitable. It's going to happen. But the key is to deal with it as it comes rather than try and brush it to the side and act as if it ain't there and distract yourself.
Yeah, I understand.
Because it's just going to get worse. But life is good when you deal with it. It's not all doom and gloom. But it just raises your quality of life. And that's why often now, I mean, a lot of people always say to me, why are you smiling all the time? And it's because I'm thankful. Like ultimately, I'm thankful for everything, because along the journey, life isn't easy, but it's worth it, because the good times make it worth it, and there's more good times than bad. Those bad times are only a few times, but those are the ones that you remember, which is mad. Like if you think about it, my earliest memory is a negative one. Your one is
I've had a couple of some good ones, some
Yeah.
occasions.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think there's two things that I probably add to that is not often I think talking about it is therapy.
Yeah.
You know,
It
so
is.
you don't necessarily need to go to a counselor. I know people feel comfortable often speaking to people that don't really know them.
Yeah.
And if you can do that, that's fine. But just talking to somebody about issues is good generally. And having that soundboard. I've got my brother and sometimes my sister when we don't clash, and
Yeah.
and my nan even. So it's just good to talk for number two. And number two is a good book if you don't know where to start is the book I mentioned earlier about the book your children wish you had read, and that just gives you a couple of examples of how you can kind of trace back your early memories and try to understand the way you are and the way you behave.
Yeah.
For you to resolve really. So that's definitely worth a read if you get a chance.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And I'll link all these books up in the description below so everyone can grab them. And then if you've got any questions, just leave them in the comments below. And if there's any specific things that you've heard on this episode that you want us to go into more detail on a future episode, just let us know. You can either email us on the email in the description or leave it in the comments below. And but good episode.
Yeah, man. Until next time.
Yeah, until next time. Yeah. Take care, guys.
See you in a bit.
See ya. Bye.